This changes everything. What's going on, guys? It's Cimo. So yesterday we got some, I would say, earth-shattering news when it comes to the Yu-Gi-Oh! Trading card game. And that's, I don't want to call it a new Master Rule because it's not exactly Master Rule 5. It's kind of like an update to Master Rule 4. I don't know. It's a bit weird, but it's an official update to the game. And yeah, this is insane. Like, this is absolutely ridiculous. I don't think any of us saw that this was coming. A lot of us were thinking that around this time, because there's supposed to be a new anime, we're supposed to be getting a new game mechanic, so something similar to, like, you know, the next step after Link summoning. But boy, were we wrong. Holy shit. Okay, so before I go any further, I'm just going to go ahead and read to you guys exactly what is going on. So what happened was yesterday, the OCG had a live stream not only talking about the new rules for the OCG, so in the Asian territories, but also debuting a lot of new stuff about the anime. And what happened is that we got confirmation that for the new set of rules moving forward for Yu-Gi-Oh!, it goes a little something like this. So the short version is you can place Fusion, Synchro, and Xyz monsters that you summon from the extra deck in an extra monster zone or a main monster zone, even if it's not being pointed to by a Link monster. Now, Link monsters and Pendulum monsters being summoned from the extra deck specifically still follow the current rules that we've abided by thus far, where they must be placed in either an extra monster zone or a main monster zone that's being pointed to by a Link monster. So we're just like going back to Master Rule 3, basically, where you're just able to spam the board into oblivion with any amount of Fusion, Synchro, or Xyz monsters. This is absolutely ridiculous. Like, as soon as I read this, I was like, at first I thought that this was like a joke, right? Because like the fact that we're going back to how the game used to be, being able to just have this insane, we already have ridiculous boards, right? But now that we're able to go back and essentially play all these older strategies that we had before, like, I have no words for it. I think what's astonishing to me is that I was talking about recently, and this is kind of going back to like when Links first came out. What was one of the biggest issues we had when Link monsters were released? Well, one of the biggest issues we had was that people had to jump through all these different hoops so that they could kind of do the same thing that their decks were able to before. But if you didn't have the right Link monsters, your deck wasn't able to do that. And so as a result of that, all of these older strategies pretty much fell by the wayside and became virtually unplayable until they either got a Link that like directly supported the deck specifically or happened to get enough good generic Links that those older strategies became playable. There's also the fact, too, that in the recent metagame, if you've been keeping up with the game, in that the top 4 decks, or the top 5 decks, if you want to put it that way, have pretty much been the same for about the better part of a year. And looking forward, because we know what a lot of the new products are, because Japan gets them several months before we do, there wasn't really anything that was going to like eclipse the power level of the decks that are currently in the game. So a lot of us were kind of perplexed because we're like, okay, if nothing is really going to change soon, yeah, we get Dual Overload and like all the Link Vrains Pack 3 cards and Crystron Needle Fiber and all that. Yeah, that's one thing, but like, is that really going to change a whole lot? I wasn't really thinking it would, but this, on the other hand, the amount of potential now is going to be limitless. I think this is actually going to draw so many people back into the game because so many people hated the fact that they couldn't play their older strategies simply due to the fact of the way Link monsters were restrictive in their inherent nature. But now that you don't technically need the Link monsters depending on what strategy that you're playing, this just opens up so many opportunities for people to be able to play the game, and I think this might be like the renaissance that Yu-Gi-Oh! Needed to really get people excited about the game again. Talk about shaking up the meta. This is going to just completely throw the meta into a state of chaos and disarray, because as soon as April 1st hits, which, by the way, they actually just announced this morning, at the time of recording this video, on the official Yu-Gi-Oh! Channel, that we're going to be getting these changes in the TCG on April 1st as well. So it's not even like Japan gets it first and then we get it like in July, which is typically what happens when like a new mechanic gets introduced. We saw this like with Code of the Duelist and Duelist Alliance when they introduced pendulums. That's always been the case, but we're getting both the TCG and OCG onto this new updated master rule, let's call it, at the same time. That's incredible. Just think about all the different decks that you're going to be able to play now that maybe you couldn't previously play before, or the decks themselves could be played but not to their full potential. My mind immediately jumped to a few things. First of all, Burning Abyss. Burning Abyss is one of my favorite decks ever, and yes, while Cherubini has been a very good to the deck, and at the same time, yes, while Burning Abyss is like playable, it's nowhere near as good as it used to be when you're able to assemble multiple Dantes and do like traditional Burning Abyss things back during the Duelist Alliance format. We can play like that again. We're able to have these boards of multiple Dantes and just do all these crazy things that we were able to do before, and that is fucking awesome. Think about like with Shaddolls. Shaddolls had such a heavy restriction because they were a fusion-based deck, and if you didn't have the proper link markers or link arrows to be able to do things, it was so restrictive, but Shaddolls are actually going to be playable again because now you can El Shaddol Fusion on your opponent's turn without worrying about having a stupid link monster to be able to summon a fusion monster to. That's amazing! Think about decks like, I don't know, like any of the synchro spam decks that were able to go into stuff like Quasar or all the different things. I know we've gotten certain cards like, I think Junk Speeder or whatever that Megaton promo was from, I believe, 2018 that can like summon a bunch of monsters to the board and locks you into synchro summoning. That card is actually playable now because you're not restricted under Master Rule 4's Link Monster restriction any longer. Think about decks like DDD. DDD can just maybe be viable. I know it was like viable for like 2 weeks when it was first released, but Master Rule 4 completely crippled that deck's capabilities. But now that we don't have to worry about Link Monsters anymore, maybe it's going to be good. I think another thing too that a lot of people are overlooking is how this is actually going to affect people playing, not necessarily from an archetype-based standpoint, but just from having accessible tools in their arsenal of whatever decks they're deciding to make. Do you guys remember not too long ago when Millennium Eyes Restrict was actually a very powerful card simply due to the fact that it allowed you to protect your board from hand traps, and then as soon as the combo ended, you could just link off that Millennium Eyes Restrict or do whatever you want with it really, but once your combo was established, you could have just done anything with it to get it off the board. Well, we can go back to doing that now, and Millennium Eyes Restrict actually has a place in the game, and you don't have to worry about utilizing your extra monster zone anymore, because now you can just place it in your main monster zone, have some immunity to your opponent's hand traps, and just go off and combo freely. There's so many different interactions like this. I mean, think about like heroes. Remember back in the day with totally awesome heroes when the end board for a hero player was to end on like a Shadow Mist that they could use Mass Change on to go into Dark Law, and then you could go like take 2 of your level 4s and make a Bahamut Shark, detach to summon totally awesome. That was like when heroes were in their prime, and now they're gonna get to do that again. Like, I could just keep going on and on and on about the number of countless examples and archetypes in different decks that are going to be playable again to a degree that, you know, we're going to get to experiment with a lot of different strategies that people weren't able to experiment with before. And I think what I like about this the most is that it's still limiting from the perspective of the Link monsters as well as the Pendulum monsters as well, because spamming 5 from your extra deck with Pendulum summoning was just absolutely absurd, but there's still a check and balance on Pendulum, because if you want a Pendulum summon from the extra deck, you still need to have the Link markers, and I think that's actually a very good balancing mechanism for Pendulum. And when it comes to Link monsters, you still need to have those Link arrows to be able to go into Link monsters. I think it adds another layer of complexity for anyone that might be entering the game, just because it's like, oh, there's some monsters that you can summon freely and some you need to have link arrows pointing to. So I think that's like one of the minor downsides here, and honestly that's going to happen. I mean, Yu-Gi-Oh! Is arguably one of, if not the most complex card game out there, so again, like, it hurts the barrier to entry aspect, but I think for any longtime fans of the game who had a fan favorite archetype or who had a deck that they just really cherished playing that got crippled by Master Rule 4, I think this updated version is actually going to do a lot of good, and I think it's really going to help revitalize the game and bring a lot of people back to the game who really kind of got put off once Master Rule 4 and Link monsters came into effect, because now you're able to play those old decks again. You're able to just take advantage of those older strategies and take on some of the new stuff and see just how well you can do. I think one of the big downsides here about this is that we don't know what kind of degenerate shenanigans is going to come out from this. You do have to admit Link monsters have had somewhat of a balancing mechanism against crazy spam decks, but to a degree, we don't know how this is going to affect like top tier contenders. You have to think that a deck like Thunder Dragon, which is one of the best decks at the moment, actually gets like buffed from this, because since it's a fusion based archetype, it's very easy for you to go into multiple Colossi or multiple copies of Titan without taking advantage of the extra monster zone. So some decks that are already very powerful get buffed from this, but mark my words, when we get the April ban list or whatever ban list is supposed to come out before or near we get the new update to Master Rule 4, that is going to be one of the biggest ban lists we have seen in ages, because they are going to probably have to hit so many different cards to stop all these other older strategies from just being completely and utterly just degenerate. So we might have like 10, 15, maybe even 20 different hits on that list, simply just as a safeguard so that the format just doesn't get completely turned to shit. But nonetheless, I think this might be one of the greatest things for Yu-Gi-Oh! Imaginable that none of us even thought was going to happen. But those are just my thoughts, you guys. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think. I'm still processing this, because this change is monumental, and it's going to forever change the game in, I think, a positive way, but at the same time, it could go very, very poorly as well if it's not executed correctly. But I'm really curious to hear your guys' thoughts as well. So, guys, thank you so much for watching the video, and we'll see you next time.